Thought Leadership from PwC's National Office.
Hello, I'm Heather Horn, PwC's U.S. Sustainability Technical Leader, and welcome back to PwC's Accounting Podcast. In today's episode, we're focusing on the evolving sustainability and broader reporting landscape in Europe. Over the past few years, the pace of change in policy, reporting standards, and where assurance is required have accelerated with ripple effects far beyond Europe. To help us navigate these developments, I'm happy to be joined today by Eelco van der Enden, CEO of Accountancy Europe. Many of you will remember Eelco from his time leading the Global Reporting Initiative, but today he'll share his perspective from the heart of the European profession. We'll cover Accountancy Europe's role, the biggest forces reshaping reporting and assurance, and the challenges and opportunities for accountants, controllers, and companies adapting to this fast-moving environment. Along the way, we'll talk about how companies, especially U.S. multinationals, can stay agile amid shifting EU policymaking, how Accountancy Europe helps provide a European-level perspective, and where controllers can go beyond compliance to add strategic value. And, of course, much more. Before we get started, just a quick note. If you'd like to watch the video version of today's discussion, you'll find a link in the show notes along with other resources. So Eelco, thank you so much for joining us today. And I was reflecting, or we were just chatting, that I think it's been 2 years since we've had you on the podcast, or it's something around that time. And definitely a lot has changed. Because last time you were on, you were still leading the Global Reporting Initiative, and now you've moved to Accountancy Europe. So just for our listeners' benefit, particularly because about half of our audience is here in the US, can you just explain the role of Accountancy Europe and your role there as well?
Well, Accountancy Europe is a member organization that represents auditors, accountants, and advisory in Europe. We represent 49 institutions that are representing around 1.1 million professionals. Our role in Europe, and Europe is not only European Union, but also countries like Turkey, Switzerland, UK. What we do is basically bridging the knowledge gap between business, profession, and political decision makers in Europe, contributing to smart regulations and legislation.
So then from that perspective, would you say that a big part of your role is influencing then what's going on more broad, well, maybe not influencing, but making sure the perspective of the profession is being considered as new reporting rules and otherwise are being considered by the European Commission or otherwise?
Yeah, we're following up on public consultations, draft legislations, but also have a lot of interactions with the commissions to support them indeed in drafting good legislation, so to speak, and making them understand what the value add is of our profession to the socioeconomic cohesion that we see and the contribution to capital market as such.
So, Eelco, we are recording during New York Climate Week, so I definitely want to get to sustainability reporting, and our regular viewers know that's what I'm spending a lot of my time on, viewers/listeners. However, I know you have a much broader role, and I do think it's interesting to take a step back and think about the broader reporting landscape. And so from your perspective then, what are some of the broad forces that you would say are shaping the landscape in Europe?
In Europe, at this moment, it's all about investment climate and improving investment climate through deburdening business, basically, which means less rules and legislation, more alignment between jurisdictional legislation in Europe, and trying to indeed simplify reporting. That's what we see, and we will get to that in Omnibus. We've seen it in the Draghi report. So they are the main drivers that we will see the next 5 years out of Europe.
And Eelco, as we take a step back, we mentioned sustainability, but obviously the reporting landscape is much broader. And so are there changes then that are also being focused on? You mentioned investment and, developing capital and otherwise. So are there other changes that are needed to drive that type of investment then?
There are a lot of things needed to drive investments in Europe. And first of all, the projects that the European Commission is now engaging on are on a single European capital market and a savings and investment union. There are trillions of euros being passive on savings accounts of people. So we need to make it more attractive for people to invest. So the financial, how could I say that, the financial literacy must really increase. Secondly, there are a lot of different rules and regulations in Europe that make it quite unattractive for investors because the borders are still there. The less hindering regulations are there in doing international business, the better it is. This all needs a reset in how we approach our legal framework when it comes to investing in the European Union. And that then, of course, means that businesses need to adapt to changes in legislation and in reporting, whether that's financial reporting or sustainability reporting. The big driver, of course, is this attractiveness for investors. But it's not only for investors themselves, it's also for the businesses to make it less complicated to do cross-border business in Europe.
Yeah, it's very interesting you say that the borders are still there because I think for many people coming again from a mostly U.S. perspective, there's a sense of like, oh no, the borders are gone. You can just travel on one passport and you don't have to do border control and things. But then I think dealing with the CSRD and seeing the transposition process and all those things, then you really, I do think, get a much better sense of how different things can be in different countries. And so from an Accountancy Europe perspective, then, are you then mostly focused on working with the European Commission, the Parliament, the Council? Is it individual member states? How do you decide where to focus your efforts?
Well, primarily it is indeed following what's happening in Europe, but then also on behalf of our members, which are also located outside Europe. That interaction is very important to know where we can support for improvements in the European economies. The thing that now became most clear is that more alignment between jurisdictional legislation is something that we must really bring forward. We have 27 EU member states that are all more or less competing for their fair share in the market, which is not always that much contributing to growth. Because if you as a business have to deal with 26 different tax systems throughout Europe for VAT, it makes it quite difficult to cross-border business. Same applies to business law, same applies to local statutory reporting requirements and so forth. So we have a ton of possibilities to improve and make it easier for businesses to basically operate in Europe, which will make it more attractive for investors since cost of compliance will go down, which will increase profitability.
But then I guess what do you see as the role of the profession, the accounting profession, audit profession, in pushing forward some of those changes?
We have a lot of experience on how businesses are perceiving and having to work with newly introduced rules and regulations or with existing ones. We know what it means to extract certain data for reporting purposes. We know what it means to be compliant in multi-jurisdictions and how complex it can be also to interpret certain rules and regulations. Our profession can support either through advice in the field of accounting or advisory when it comes to IT or tax, and then also assessing the quality of data. So building trust in data that are to be published is something that is crucial for capital markets and economic systems. And that is where we step in. We support and work in close cooperation with tax administrations when it comes to easing up audit and compliance systems through cooperative compliance modeling. We support businesses when it comes to introducing risk management and control frameworks to better assess risks and enable businesses to extract data in an easy way that is needed under certain types of legislation. But that by itself, less legislation means less data. That doesn't mean automatically that is better. We need smart legislation that contributes to a problem we try to address and to solve. And that is where we can also contribute towards decision makers in showing them our experience on the intricacies and difficulties of implementing certain parts of legislation into business, looking at supply chains. We assess and have experience on how best to build and introduce these data extracting systems that can automatically validate on behalf of supervising institutions, the quality of the report supervising institution like pension administrators, national security institutions, national banks, stock exchange committees, and so forth. So we play a very important part in supporting businesses on the one side, and on the other side, regulators in drafting sound legislation.
Well, and then you have the, I'll say, profession itself, so the audit firms and otherwise that also have a perspective and point of view. And I guess it's interesting because I'm just reflecting, even in the US, it's not quite the same, but we have the AICPA that represents the profession. But again, there's so many different constituencies. And when I start to think about you with all your member organizations, I think so 49, you have your 27 member states, and you have a number of different parties that are involved. There's a lot of different perspectives that you're trying to represent. So is there difficulty then in being one voice for the profession?
You would think so, because we auditors and accountants and tax advisors.
Right.
And how can you speak with one voice? Well, the common objective we all have is seeing that we can work in an environment where that adds value to business and society, because we work on behalf of the public interest. That is our major occupation, basically. So if you think out of value add, then you have some common themes that really stand out in all aspects of our members and our professions. Whether you're a small, medium practice or a large business, or more in the field of IT auditing or accounting or tax advice or sustainability audit or accounting. And that is that things need to be easy to comply at low cost and showing a visible value add. So each part of the regulatory supply chain, as I call it, from the inception of an idea, we need to regulate something and introduce something to report on or to make less attractive, to the moment something transposes into local legislation, is something where we can contribute and where we, with our expertise, can say, okay, listen, if you go with this idea, it will be extremely expensive for businesses to comply. If you come with this idea, you will see a trickle-down effect that may be detrimental to your original idea, since it is not the business that reports that piece of information, but parts of the smaller medium enterprises in the supply chain that will be faced with some problems. If you come with this idea on taxation, it will have a negative impact on another piece of your business, because investments will be rerouted through a different structure. So it is about smart legislation. It is about proportionality. And there you can very, very much and very well have a common voice, or being the voice of the profession in Europe.
But so then from that perspective, let's say you are talking to the commission or to someone on the legislative side. Do you think there's a knowledge gap in terms of understanding? So you're talking about, well, if you do this here, it might impact this other piece of legislation there. And here's all these different considerations. And do you feel like there is the interest, time, patience, understanding to really understand all those implications? Because they're dealing with so many different issues. And I mean, we've looked at some of their agendas. It's just, so many different things. So just curious how you feel like some of that messaging is received.
There is a huge knowledge gap, not only between political decision makers in our profession, but also between society and profession.
Users, right?
And even between business and our profession. Let's be perfectly honest there. And I think, being perfectly honest, we have to look in the mirror and see how we can improve our messaging to such an account that it will be easier to understand where the value add of the profession lies. And that means less technical interactions, more solution-based. What is the problem we try to solve, and how can we solve it? Political decision makers, members of parliament, commissioners, their agendas are a nightmare.
Yes.
They have no time to go into the details. Most of their staff haven't time to go into too much of the details. So that means that our communication must be more on the solution and more oriented and driven towards how we can achieve certain objectives, and making them, of course, understand that we also have the technical baggage and knowledge to underpin that solution or that idea. What I also think is that traditionally our profession, we are very much raised as subject matter experts. Technical expertise is crucially important. But marketing never was, I think, the biggest of talents of our type of organization, so to speak. That is something that can change, and I don't think it is that difficult if we think more out of that solution and what's the problem you try to fix angle. The understanding of what we do already starts at the misapprehension between the role of an auditor and an accountant. So if we do not have that right at this moment for many decision makers and the public, then it becomes very difficult to get into more technical discussions on why certain things that we do, how we do it, are important. It's, by the way, not only the knowledge gap that we see with the political decision makers and the wider public. We also see it with younger people that may or may not be interested in pursuing a career in audit or accounting. Apparently, the attractiveness of the profession is a bit under pressure, so to speak. But looking at the landscape where the things are changing so fast and become so more interlinked, the profession becomes so much more interesting than when I started to do this 35 years ago. I mean, we have digital and AI that contribute greatly to getting away of tedious manual labor, but also open fields for predictive analytics at a strategic level, to even assessing the technical and the soundness of AI itself. We've seen sustainability reporting, which opens up a complete new field of interest for auditors and accountants, which is fascinating. We see increased interest in capital markets. that are basically the pillar of our economic system. We have the introduction of crypto stablecoins currency. Who is going to assess if the counter value indeed exists? It opens up a completely new universe for the profession. And I can go on and on. Alignment of tax systems in Europe that must happen to achieve the objective of single European capital markets of us are fascinating, even for our legal friends, in order to create the momentum to drive this. So, yeah, I think my big task is bringing this message across in the proper way to bridge indeed the knowledge gap in a positive, understandable way.
So, Eelco, then that sounds like, from that perspective at least, this is the 17 to 23-year-olds that we need to be convincing that there is this huge amount of opportunity. And I mean, they also have a lot on their minds. We talked about the legislators having a lot on their minds, like just reaching them and giving that message. That seems like an enormous task.
Yes, and you can't start with that task soon enough. So basically already at school, making people understand why what we do does matter to society and the public interest. Without trust, financial systems don't work. We are the providers of that trust, of justified trust. That has a big social and environmental element in it, of course. Call it financial savviness or market savviness, making younger people understand how markets really work, how global supply chains work, and what the role is we play in it, how you can contribute to public and human good while assessing these things or advising on how to deal with them or how to report on some of those obligations, which is not like in the old days behind an Excel spreadsheet.
Or even paper. Eelco, when I started, we had no Excel. It was just paper.
I remember my first laptop was 10 kilos or
a
little screen.
Yes. And you had to be a weightlifter to carry it around. So.
And we see things like wellness. In our days, you were the king of the hill if you had 4 pizza nights during busy period, and it was very macho based. That environment that completely changed.
Yes. Well, I guess when we talk about changing, we've mentioned sustainability a few times, and there is an intersection here with the attractiveness of the profession, and we talk about sustainability reporting. But very interesting time right now in Europe when we think about the impact of the omnibus, when we think about the consultation that EFRAG is doing right now on the new ESRSs. And so from an Accountancy Europe perspective, how do you view this broader sustainability landscape and maybe what's coming next? Obviously, there's a lot going on with the content proposal and where that might go. So just curious what your views are.
I did a strategy paper in my GRI time with the title or a subsection, Will the Magic Last? So that was 2 years ago. Everybody was in a buoyant mood, sustainability reporting. You can't have enough of it, and more and more and more. But you already saw a movement preparing a pushback.
Yes.
We've seen it here in the US. We've seen it in Europe with political landscape changing. You will see it everywhere. So the pendulum is now swinging the other side. And as always with pendulums, they go from the left to the right, and then they end in the middle. The omnibus after the Draghi report was inevitable. Also looking at the political landscape and the pushback that came. Did we go too far? If you look at it from a pure reporting and compliance point of view, the answer was apparently yes.
Yes.
Because it was now all scaled down quite substantially. Whether that's a good idea from a planet point of view or a bad idea, that's a political question. What I do predict is that sustainability will be here to stay,
Mm-hmm.
not because we think it's a good idea, but capital markets demand certain information on important topics
Yes.
that give insight in the resilience and risk management capabilities of businesses. We see that insurance companies and reinsurance refuse to cover damages or potential damages in certain regions for certain industries, which has an impact, of course, on the attractiveness to invest in. You will not invest in a company that's not insured because
Yes.
if it burns down,
Yes.
your money is gone, So that will not
Yeah,
happen.
you won't build a house if you can't insure. I mean, there's
If you
so
can
much.
insure it, if you
Yes.
can't get a mortgage because you
Right.
can't insure it, it will have a negative impact on portfolios for real estate investments. So in due time, capital markets will respond to the need of certain information. And then it will be back again on the political agenda in not only in a cost of compliance way, but also in a value add to functioning capital markets way. So am I negative? No, I'm not negative. I think there is a reset. Things are politicized, of course, but this is nothing new. We've seen things politicized on the introduction of international accounting standards for finance. So now we're going at the ripple effect to the same. So I'm not negative at all.
Any perspective then on the changes that, I mean, we've talked a lot here on the podcast about the huge amount of change FREG's introduced into ESRS V2. And so do you think, given the current environment, that they're going directionally where they need to, and that will be well received?
Yes, I think so. I think, in all honesty, what they achieved at FREG now in the last, since April, 5 months,
yes,
is quite amazing. There was a lot of skepticism whether they could indeed deliver.
Yes.
I think they delivered. There are always questions and ideas, but if you look at the big picture, I think they did a decent job. The cynics always say, why didn't they do that from the start? Well, everything has a learning curve in it. Some say, but now it's completely useless because it does not achieve what it should achieve. Well, first of all, we don't know what the end game will be.
No.
Looking at thresholds of the FTEs that are involved, 500,000, 3,000. But it is still better than nothing. So to speak. To some, the glass is always half empty. To others, it's half full. What we did learn from this episode is that we should never go through such an episode again. Never. It wasn't really very favorable to building trust in the institutions and to the system. I mean, people and businesses have been working for years under the expectation that we would have ESRS in the way how it was presented. Then in mid-flight, turn it around like it was turned around. It may have been the necessary thing to do, but it would have been better to have prevented it at all. You can't afford to do many more omnibuses with very recently or to be introduced legislation again, because it will hurt credibility of the institutions.
Yeah, although it's interesting, Eelco, because if I just focus in the US on financial reporting, so the sort of modern era started in the 1930s with the SEC and everything else. That was almost 100 years ago. And so it's almost as though sustainability reporting was trying to take almost 100 years of lessons from financial reporting in 1 or 2 years. But I agree with your point. I think that's still very frustrating. I think it's very difficult for companies, but I also think you do need to give some recognition that there does need to be some time for evolution.
Yes, oh, absolutely.
Yes.
It is all quite new.
Yes.
I mean, if you see the speed with which the standards were basically constructed, both at the side of the ISSB and then the side of FREG, And if you compare that indeed with your very apt comparison with financial reporting, it has gone with the speed of light. Perhaps we went too fast.
Yes. Well, I guess we'll see this next round. Hopefully, I think from PwC's perspective, we're saying in our letter a lot of positive changes. So it'll be interesting to see what comes next with, the trilogue negotiations and otherwise.
Yeah.
All right. So going back to the broader landscape, let me ask you a few other questions, because one of the questions we hear from companies in the US is that it's so important right now to understand this landscape in the EU. And I will say it's quite complicated coming from someone that, with the perspective of someone from the US, just to understand all the parties involved and to understand how this landscape is operating. So what advice, when you are meeting with non-EU companies, are you giving when they're thinking about reporting in the EU?
Follow us closely. Follow us closely, and stay au courant, on top of any changes. That would be my advice. My takeaway for them would be the European Commission and institutions are dead serious for reducing the burden and the cost of compliance. That is a very serious project. But we have our own legislation as European Union, and we will keep making our own legislation. But I think the international lens, international business environment will be taken more into consideration. Perhaps the effects of the Green Deal, ESRS, which of course its objectives you cannot disagree with, because it's for a healthier, better, profitable planet for all of us. But it's a way how to get there that I think the wake-up call the Commission got via the Draghi report and other events is being taken very serious. So I shouldn't be afraid of an overburdened compliance landscape in Europe. I think it will improve. The issues to follow are, of course, single European capital market. How will that work? Will we be able to unlock what I call lazy European capital for more investment in startups, which could also be very attractive then for foreign investors and foreign businesses. So yeah, I think Europe is indeed getting and will get more attractive for US businesses to do business in.
Yeah, what you're talking about with the single European market and otherwise, I mean, that is an improvement, and it would give access to a lot more. So I do think it's important for people to pay attention. I guess related question that we often get is, we're always getting asked, well, what are other companies doing? What are my competitors doing? What is this, that? How are they responding? And so in your role as Accountancy Europe, you have such a broad view of the landscape. So do you have perspectives on some of that, or some role in providing some of that type of information?
We are currently working on a very large project called Purpose 2030, where we as Accountancy Europe will set our longer-term strategic objectives for the next 5-10 years. As a member organization, you go back to your members and you ask, what is it what you need?
Yes.
But also to those organizations we have a lot of interaction with, like IOSCO, OECD, European Banking Federation, but all of our colleagues of IFAC and so forth. We ask the same. Topics that pop up are digital, AI, attractiveness of the profession, and then benchmark information. So you're spot on. Everybody wants benchmark information. Is it business, what other businesses are doing? But it's also local regulators or our members that are asking what is happening in other countries from a regulatory point of view. Yes, we have a reasonable good oversight, what we don't have yet at Accountancy Europe is a good, smart way to share that information. So part of this P30 project is an overhaul of our IT infrastructure, whereby sharing this information online with benchmarking capabilities and data analytics and so forth will be part of the service offering of our organization.
Oh, wow. So more to come
Yes.
on that topic.
Yes.
All right. And of course, you mentioned digital AI that came up previously in our conversation. And I feel like every conversation about accounting right now has those topics in there. And so from your perspective, again, if you're looking at this time horizon to 2030, what are some of the major impacts that you're expecting to see, and how are you as an organization considering those?
I think it's about improving data analytics capabilities and getting rid of tedious manual labor. Of course, you always hear people that push back on the use of tooling and technology. It already started with the introduction of the spinning jenny.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I mean, it created more jobs than less.
Yes.
Certain jobs went, but more came. It's the same with technology.
Mm-hmm.
It will give more insights in data, proper data, more predictive analytics for strategic decision making. Of course, we need now to assess whether certain AI tools deliver what they promise they do in a proper, correct, non-polluted way. But this is a revolution that is unstoppable. The world changes constantly. I'm always getting a bit tired. People say, we live in exciting times. Mention me one time that was not exciting.
No. Yes.
I mean, everything changes constantly.
Yes.
What we must be careful of is that the haves and the have-nots, that the gap there gets too big. So business and our profession very well equipped to deal with AI and technology. We know that some governmental institutions, oversight institutions and boards are not there yet. So if we see that in oversight or compliance assessment, the institutions responsible for do not keep up with the possibilities that the markets deliver, then it may be more a pullback than a push forward of making things easier to comply at lower cost. So we must onboard everybody in that supply chain, as I call it, or in that regulatory environment, to be up a standard to knowing what the power is and how you can work in a safe way with these machines. So also our supervisors.
Well, it's interesting then. You are really talking then about a profession that is leading by education, by pulling more people into the profession, but by making sure then that we're not being held back in terms of how we can use these tools and otherwise, because someone else is saying, oh, well, I don't understand, so I'm just going to say no. You're saying part of our responsibility then is to actually help them come up that curve so they can appropriately work with us in governing the profession. Is that a fair way to think about it?
Yes. So I'll give you an example in Belgium, where I live, and I can compare it with the Netherlands. We have mandatory electronic invoicing as from January 1st, 2026. Small, medium enterprises, everybody. So I have it. We have it. It works extremely well. And for many small, medium enterprises, it's ideal. And it really contributes to a less complicated compliance framework you have to work in with the papers, and then you have to file, and then you get a question
and matching.
And
yes,
there was a little pushback, but now everybody is happy. In the Netherlands, there is still the discussion raging whether or not we should have this system, because it could be a burden on behalf of businesses that are not used to work with technology. I think that is fundamentally wrong to have that discussion, not to be very careful and to support small, medium enterprises in making the transition. But you do not live off an island anymore. If you see how some countries are using technology in their economies, in their data storage, exchange of data through various organizations, the ease with which it is done and the value it can bring, you cannot stay behind. You just cannot stay behind. So governmental institutions should also adapt to the fact that things are changing faster than they may have foreseen in the past. But that doesn't mean that they should keep doing what they do. That let's say it what it is. It erodes trust. It erodes trust in institutions if they lag behind with the technical capabilities that are available and are being used in order to provide better data at lower cost.
Yes. So if I'm just thinking that I'm one of these small companies, and if I'm ready and the government is saying, well, I'm not, I mean, to your point, that you don't want, that should not be what happens. And that's where it seems like we as a profession have an important bridge.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yes. And also looking at, I didn't even mention it. So in Europe, we were shaken up and woke up to the fact that we need to really invest not only in our infrastructure, but also into our defense and security. There's a lot of money going around there. So public accountability by governments through public accounting and auditing will become a huge topic and a huge field of interest for our profession. So also there we can contribute. It's a field you don't hear many people speaking of, but I think that for not only for the public interest, but to all our interest, I think public accounting will get a lot of attention, or should get a lot of attention.
This is going full circle back to attracting more people to the profession, because there is so much different opportunity.
Yeah.
So Eelco, if I just take a step back then, and you mentioned your project for 2030, what should our listeners expect to see coming out of Accountancy Europe over the next few years? Any places to watch?
Well, first, of course, our board needs to approve the ideas.
Yes. Yes. So I guess you don't have to get ahead of yourself, but maybe any previews you feel comfortable with.
So, okay, if we get a go ahead, then the quality of the technical work will still be there. I mean, the team is doing an amazing, excellent job when it comes to the quality of publication and supporting our members therein. The thing that will be topped up is our, let's call it, increased policy engagements. And we will become more vocal in the market to support decision makers in their decision-making process. So that's what you will see more. You will see more Accountancy Europe global, because the extraterritorial effect of legislation is touching us all.
Yes.
If we make regulations in Europe, they have an effect on U.S. business. If the U.S. administration takes a position on import duties, then it has an effect on European business. So whether some say or want to see more isolationism in the current markets, that is difficult to achieve. You cannot put the clock back. So we will engage more internationally to that effect with our colleagues, with the other public accounting organizations. There are some universal topics that attract us all. That is standard setting. The global baseline would be very helpful for providing more comparable data to markets and stakeholders. It will reduce cost of compliance. It will make, by the way, the audit easier, because you can work out of one set of standards. It's the attractiveness agenda, attracting young people for the profession. We need more people. So that is a really universal global issue. Then we have indeed the huge and bridging the knowledge gap on digital and AI, including data security. That is a topic that is quite important. And there is another one that we also see at a global level, something we must get our ideas more around how to communicate that one. More and more governmental institutions, and they come with certain regulations, but the traditional oversight and audit of that work is no longer done by a governmental institute, like a tax administration or a national bank or what do we have? A pension oversight committee. A lot of the work they traditionally done has now been basically transferred to business itself, that then looking for advice or support of accountants or auditors. I think of anti-money laundering, know your customer, issues around cooperative compliance modeling. So that means that there is more to be done by businesses and by accountants. But in the past, business didn't pay for it because it was an activity performed by the government or by governmental institutions. Now our support costs money, and there you can see some friction. So offloading certain activities out of regulatory bodies towards business, towards the private sector, can be done. But please take into account that has a cost. It comes at a price. So that a governmental institution doesn't have the capacity or capabilities or investment power to do it themselves and thereby ask support, basically, by law from business and our sector, doesn't come for free.
Right. Well, and I think that's an important point. And if I loop back to what you said about reporting and a global baseline, because I do think that's something we hear from companies, but I think that goes all the way back to the comment you made about value add and easy to understand, and some level of simplification as well. We want to make sure whatever those standards are to meet all those requirements and are really fit for purpose in the current environment, particularly given all these other forces that we're talking about.
Yeah, and you see also that in legislation and sometimes also in standards, they serve multi-objectives, and that's making them very difficult to understand. And the famous example is, of course, tax law. It's being used as a source of revenue, but also as an instrument, as a tool to encourage or discourage certain behavior. With your energy taxes and high taxes on tobacco, alcohol, whatever you have. And it's being used, mostly in Europe, as a tool for the redistribution of wealth. So, well, if you then are a lawmaker or you're in a parliament and you all want to have your little specific objective, then you create these compliance monsters that in the end perhaps serve nothing. So what is it that we try to solve? And it's very difficult to, with one standard or one law, serve everybody.
All right. Well, maybe final question for you. We've covered a huge number of topics today, and really, I think you've outlined many of the reasons as a profession the profession is so important, and then the role of Accountancy Europe. But any other points that I didn't hit on that are top of mind for you right now, or that you think should be top of mind for accountants, auditors, or preparers to be thinking about as they look ahead to the future?
I would like to say that some of the negative sounds I hear are completely unfounded. The profession has a tremendous future. We are changing rules and regulations in Europe that need to be embedded in business processes, that need, let's call it, new reporting angles. that make it very attractive to be in this field. The role we play in certain societal relevant topics is only increasing. Sustainability reporting, but also AML, supporting in the global supply chains. I'm very positive on the future. We always go to pluses and minuses. That's part of life. I think that the economy is doing quite well. I think the interaction between international organizations is improving. I think the focus we see in Europe on deregulation and coming to more prudent regulations is serious. It is up to the individual member states now to make sure that we can push forward and make the alignments that we want to make, because it is there is a thing in Europe, and I guess you will also see the same here in the US at state level, that if things go wrong at a national level, then Brussels is blamed.
Yes.
And if things that Brussels initiated contribute to value and prosperity, then it's, of course, the responsibility of the local politicians. So that's a bit how it is. We have
human nature. I think.
Yes. we have to live with that. But I think we are on the right track of growing value and prosperity in Europe and across the world.
All right. Well, Eelco, that's a very positive note to end on. So definitely, as always, I really appreciate all your insight, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And to our viewers/listeners, thank you also for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed our discussion, and I encourage you to tune in again next week for more developments in the world of sustainability and more broadly across the world of accounting. And to make sure you never miss any of our episodes, either subscribe on your favorite platform, or as always, you can subscribe to our newsletter at viewpoint.pwc.com. Thanks again for joining us today.